give a warm welcome to the hosts of The Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins. Welcome to Bride of Alternate Ending. I am Brennan Klein, and I'm very, very posh, as you can tell. And with me, as always, is my co-ghost Tim Brayton. How are you doing today, Tim? I cannot.
I find it. I do find it very, very charming how you're just trying to impersonate. Hugh Grant. Yes. Thank you very much, Brennan.
Yeah, thank you. You're so good. See, this is why I have you around. Yes, we are. So, you know what? I'm stumbling over my words. I'm doing basically a Jeff Goldblum impression. Is the problem? But yes, welcome to Bride of Alternate Ending, the horror sideshow filled with the freaks and geeks of the world. I don't fucking know. Okay, so
what is happening on this episode?
My brain has melted. Look,
I know it's hot where you are.
It's actually
on fire.
Here's the thing. Everything's on fire. It's usually on fire when it is 100 degrees, but it's currently on fire in winter, which I think is probably helping us in not making it even worse. But that does mean that with the air purifiers that I have running in the apartment, it is fucking frigid inside my apartment right now.
I would like to know what the number of degrees inside your apartment is, and then I will tell you what the temperature is in Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay, it's probably upwards of 50 degrees if I had to guess, but the air is blowing around. It's very cold.
Okay, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to hold my phone up to the camera, and you're going to tell everyone what the temperature is in Madison, Wisconsin, Brennan.
Oh, it is allegedly 4 degrees. Is that possible?
It is 4. There are 4 degrees outside.
Does that happen?
I can count them on one hand.
Oh, no. And I'm literally wearing like a woolen denim coat right now because it's so cold. I am.
I mean, to be fair, it's not 4 degrees in my apartment, or I would be dead.
Yes.
So
okay. Yes, that's fair. I think famously LA apartments have no insulation, so the second it gets
they wouldn't need to. Yeah.
Yeah. The second it gets below 60, it is like an Arctic wind and a tundra. But anyway, yeah. So my brain's a little all over the place because everything's on fire, and every time I go to bed, I'm like, am I gonna wake up at 3 a.m. having to evacuate? So far, hasn't had to happen, but you never know. So yeah, I'm a little all over the place, but. This month, we were going to do what we normally do in January, which is following up on movies that we covered in the previous year, doing sequels or remakes or whatever. But this past year just was not paying dividends.
We didn't curate our original list with an eye towards there being good sequels, and so we ended up with some real just stinky options that we decided not to pursue.
Yes. So what we decided to do was extend our kind of, I guess, awards season skeletons in the closet theme, because in February and March we will be covering horror movies that were made by this year's Oscar nominees. They have not been announced yet, so for January we went with the Golden Globe nominees, and we put up a poll on the Patreon. Patrons voted for us to discuss Hugh Grant in the 1988 Ken Russell supernatural horror. People call it a horror comedy. It has comedy. It has comic relief. I wouldn't call it a horror comedy, though. I guess we'll talk about that.
I know it has comedy, it has horror, and I don't know that I would say it is necessarily either of those things, although it is closer to being a horror film than to being a comedy.
Certainly. But yes, this is the Lair of the White Worm. And Hugh Grant, he did return to the genre last year in Heretic, for which he was nominated and for which he lost to Sebastian Stan. But yes, Lair of the White Worm. Neither of us had seen this movie before. Am I correct?
You are correct. It is probably not the single highest profile Ken Russell film that I hadn't seen, because I think it's one that Ken Russell fans tend to be a little like, oh, and then he made Lair of the White Worm. But it's certainly one of the more immediately recognizable titles in the sense of, oh, I know that's a movie of the Ken Russell films I had not seen. So
yeah,
so it felt like a gap to me.
It felt like a gap to me too. Although this is my first Ken Russell movie, which
I would like to say that you are going to find films you like more than this one, but spoiler alert, we will get to our opinions about White Worm in case I'm already slopping them all over the podcast.
No, well, that's what we're here for. But yeah, I mean, I definitely am. I know not to take this as his calling card. I do believe that there are moments in this movie that are more reminiscent of his other films.
I'll bet you can identify them readily. There are two.
Yes.
I was counting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so Lair of the White Worm, it is based on a Bram Stoker full-on novel, right? It's
full-on novel. I believe his last novel.
And last novels are always so good.
And also, keep in mind, this is a man who wrote Dracula, which, as we just were discussing on last week's podcast, is bad. And Lair of the White Worm, I think, is regarded pretty universally as his weakest novel.
Okay, I am not surprised because this movie felt like Ken Russell was wrestling with Bram Stoker the entire time.
And to be clear, I have not read any Bram Stoker other than Dracula, which I think is true for almost everyone who has read any Bram Stoker, which is not all that many people in the first place, I suspect. Mm-hmm. I get the impression there is not a ton that this movie actually has that you would recognize from the novel, other than there being a white worm and it having a lair in which it lives.
Oh, okay. That is good to know. Yeah, I did not do... I'm a little... because of the situation in LA right now, this last podcast and this one, I'm a little under-researched than normal. But here's what we got going on in Lair of the White Worm. We basically... I think of this as a kind of Bram Stoker idiosyncrasy in that we just simply have too many characters for the amount of plot there is in the movie.
Which is baffling because there's only really 5 characters, which for a 90-minute film does not feel indulgent. Like, you should be able to make a 90-minute film with 5 characters.
You should.
And yet I feel like 2 of them are like superfluous.
Yes. I guess we'll get to it. I would certainly say that, like, I think I agree, but I think we're thinking of 2 different sets of 2. But yeah, so we open on a paleontologist, archaeologist. He's a something. Do you know?
The IMDb calls him an archaeologist, and so does Wikipedia. So I think we will assume archaeologist.
Great. His name is Angus, and that's how you know he's Scottish. The other way you know he's Scottish is
his
that
name,
he's...
I was going to say, even better, his name is Angus Flint.
Great. It's a great name. And the other way you know he's Scottish is that he's played by Peter Capaldi, a very young Peter Capaldi with young Hugh Grant's hair. I don't know how that happened.
At first, when it was, because he's introduced from the hands up, it's a very sort of like cool quote unquote character introduction where it pans up and we see this, like, we see his hands, then it pans up and we see his head bowed down. I assumed it was Hugh Grant, and I was like, wow, Hugh Grant's Scottish accent is stronger than I would have assumed.
Yeah.
And it's like the face looks up and it's like this little infant version of Peter Capaldi, which freaked me out because Peter Capaldi just doesn't. It's like when you have to grapple with like Maggie Smith having once been young. It's like, no,
yeah,
that's a lie. You were never young. And I did not like it. It made me feel very confused about the order of the universe.
Absolutely. It was deeply upsetting. But you know, Peter Capaldi's here, and that's always a nice thing. He is staying at this inn run by 2 sisters whose parents went missing, presumably died a year ago. We've got Eve Trent, who I believe is the one with short blonde hair, and Mary Trent, who is the one with longer, darker hair.
I definitely, yes, Mary Trent is definitely the brunette.
Okay, great. And they're very much like they're just like weird Cockney nightmare characters. I hated spending
first
any
off, they
amount
are
of time
not
with them.
Cockney. Cockneys are from London.
Okay, well,
but yes,
they're I guess whatever are the like lower class quote unquote British accents that aren't Cockney, but it's like, oh, you got something to say? I'm like, shut the fuck up. What's going on with you? They were. I was very annoyed by them. Do you care about them? Did they make an impression?
No, I feel like you made a prediction that we were going to have a different set of two characters, and I don't think we do. I think we agree which two characters were the vermiform appendix that needed to be sliced off of this movie.
Yeah, well, see, here's the thing. So I we'll get there, but I also think you could entirely cut Hugh Grant from this movie and not actually be missing anything, even though he's like the second or third lead.
That is very true. But I will say about the sisters, because once we're done talking about the sisters, I suspect we're going to want to keep it done. I don't really know much of anything about Sammy Davis. Born like Samantha Davis, who went professionally by Sammy. I've seen her in things. I don't really know much about her. She is the one who plays Mary. Catherine Oxenberg, who plays Eve, the blonde one. I can tell you that I have definitely seen her in things. I saw her in The Omega Code, and indeed didn't recognize her. Was like, hey, it's that girl from The Omega Code. Had to look her up because I was like, I know that face. But having looked up Oxenberg, she is not someone whose career fills you with any quantity of enthusiasm that she has talent. She very much seems to be a slumming European royal. She is she is the daughter of the Princess of Yugoslavia.
Okay, so
that is Catherine Oxenberg.
So she had to have a career.
According to her Wikipedia page, she has the distinction of being the only member of a royal family to host Saturday Night Live. So that's neat for her.
Catherine Oxenberg hosted Saturday Night Live?
Apparently.
For what reason? What was she promoting?
She was on Dynasty, so I think she was just like a famous Dynasty person.
That show was just full of British people slumming it. Because isn't Joan Collins on Dynasty too? I think she was.
I think she is Dynasty.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So these two women, my God. But so was Sammy Davis someone? Because I think she gets the Sammy Davis as Mary Trent credit, which was very strange.
I'm looking at, I've got her filmography in front of me right now. I don't think she was anybody, certainly not in 1988. She had been in Hope and Glory, which is probably the most impressive single credit that any member of this cast had prior to making it.
Okay.
But I don't know if that does it. I don't know if the and as convention is quite as telling in Britain as it is in the US. I don't know.
Okay.
Like, I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying I don't know.
They did have that, but they also had with. It maybe even was a special appearance, but they had there was another credit afterwards with Stratford Johns, which I'm sorry, that's the name of a town. That's not a person. Yeah. Anyway, so these sisters, the blonde one talks to Peter Capaldi more. The brunette one is into Hugh Grant, and they are around. They are, I guess, the catalysts of the plot because they are looking for their missing parents, who potentially went missing in this cave on the outskirts of town that may or may not be the fabled lair of the White Worm. Did we talk? Is there anything else to say about these girls?
No. I honestly, if you hadn't reminded me that their motivation was that their parents had gone missing, and you just said to me, Tim, what is the goal? I'd have been like, I don't know, fucking Hugh Grant. I had just straight up forgotten. Like, it had evaporated from my brain. And we are less than 12 hours away from me having seen this film. So, like, that's saying something. They are there because you need to have a little sex in it, quote unquote. You need to have the romantic leads.
Were they, as someone who's not attracted to women, were they sexy? Or were they just British ladies?
You see one of them topless, right? Or do we only see oh god, I can't I'm drawing a blank on her name right now.
Amanda Donoghue?
Is she the only one? Is she the only lead who we see topless? I can't recall now.
Neither can I. I cannot commit to memory. I do know we see Hugh Grant shirtless.
Fair enough.
But yes, anyway, so sure, there's ladies in this movie. They do connect Angus to Hugh Grant's character, who is Lord James d'Ampton. He is the descendant of a kind of fabled knight who supposedly slew this white worm, which is Hugh Grant is like, that's just it's actually a dragon. It's not literally a worm, but guess what? It's a worm. Spoiler alert, there's a worm in this. And they're chumming about, and Lady Sylvia Marsh blows into town, and let me just say that is a great name. And she, spoiler alert, I guess she's a snake vampire, and she wants to resurrect her god,
the white worm.
Yeah, the white worm, who is also the snake who was kicked out of Eden for giving Eve the apple, is the implication. And she kind of under the skins some people on her, and then kind of vampires other people on route to making this happen.
Mm-hmm. Her skill set was a little bit confusing to me, but she is snake vampire is really the only term to use here, implying among other things that Bram Stoker had one card, and he just liked to play it, and that card was vampires.
Yeah, but this one can spit venom onto a crucifix,
which is not an image devoid of weight, I will say.
No.
I don't think that by 1988 showing a character defiling a crucifix in a British movie is transgressive in the way that I think Ken Russell hoped it would be, but it has some weight to it. It is the moment where we realize that she's a sexy woman in a horror movie, so we know intuitively that she's up to no good, but it's the first time we get a sense of like how she's up to no good. It's the first time we see the I will choose to say endearingly shitty snake fang prosthetics.
Yeah.
That a couple different actors are obliged to open their mouths around. I would not say that they are able to do much else with them, but
no, not so much. But I agree with you that it's endearing. I think it is a type of shitty effect that's not going to throw you out of the thing that the movie is doing.
And I feel like that's particularly true because it is, I think, very unlikely that this is meant to be taken seriously as a horror film, because Ken Russell in 1988 making a straightforward horror film would just feel not possible. So I think a level of cheesy on purpose is in this movie, and I do think a level of cheesy by accident is also in this movie, and possibly more so. But I'm going to choose to believe that the teeth are cheesy on purpose.
Yeah, no, I don't have enough of a sense of Ken Russell's career and where it was by this point. But yeah, so that's kind of it as far as the plot. They kind of bounce around each other. Evil ladies doing evil things. The heroes are slowly figuring out what's going on and if there's a way to stop it, essentially. And it's very much a... Here's the thing. I'm very curious because it sounds like maybe you liked this movie less than I did, which I'm shocked by, because you definitely like a stuffy British horror picture a lot more than me, like the Stone tapes. Like it is something like that for a very long time that becomes a Ken Russell movie whenever Lady Sylvia Marsh is on screen, and a few other times, but it's mostly just it could have aired on the BBC.
And I think there's a hierarchy here. And I'm a 3-star Lair of the White Worm watcher. You're a 3-star Lair of the White Worm watcher. We're in the same place, more or less. I like stuffy BBC style stories in which two generic country ladies flirt with a very baby-faced Hugh Grant, who, unlike Peter Capaldi, baby-faced Hugh Grant does not make my brain feel like it has been replaced by a cabbage. So I like that. I like Capaldi. I like that part of it. I like the stuffiness. I like the location shoot. The cave in question is a real cave that's actually connected to various dragon legends. So I like the things that I think you found tiresome about the movie. The problem is, as I said, there's a hierarchy. So there's when I walk into a movie wanting stuffy Britishness, I'm satiated, but I'm also a Ken Russell fan, and this is a shitty Ken Russell movie, and that's just that. It is It is a film he made towards the end of his, not really the end of his career. He actually had almost 2 decades of making things left after this. But the main trunk of his career really is starting to wind down. He had a pretty big 70s, and then he took the bag from an American producer, came to the States. The Americans clearly were like, we are going to be able to take this weird visionary thing and make it into something we can market. And Ken Russell was like, I'm not going to let you do that. I don't want you to do that. I'm going to do my own thing. So he really did not succeed in America. He made, I think, 2 movies here, one of which is just a great film. It's one of his best, Altered States. But really, really chafed under the expectations of the American film industry. So he bailed out, went back to Britain, and that was it. Like once there's that thing of like, I think the perception of having failed in America, his career just kind of flitters away. And again, this is not his last film. This is by no means close to his last film. I do think it's the last film of his that like made an impression. Like it's the last one that was released with some level of the new Ken Russell film is an event that we should care about. So that's kind of what's going on in his career at this point. And, you know, I'm kind of curious to get your impression, and I'll turn it back to you here in a second. As someone who does not know Ken Russell firsthand, but I assume has an impression because he's a notorious figure. His name is something that conjures a certain impression. What parts of the film you felt were Ken Russell-y? Because to me, it was the parts that were, I felt very gratified. It's like standing in line at a McDonald's and they're like, oops, we ran out of Big Macs, so here is a Wagyu steak. So there's parts of it that I'm just like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted from this film. 2 scenes primarily, but then also like individual moments peppered out, like maybe even as little as a shot here or there. But there just weren't enough of them. And it very much felt to me like this wackadoo genius being channeled into, again, this sort of very cozy BBC style production. And that really was not what I was here for. So I think that's where I'm coming from. The part of me that likes BBC shit is less high in the hierarchy than the part of me that wants Ken Russell to go nuts. And Ken Russell is not going nuts in this film.
Okay, got it. Yeah, well, okay, so the primary, again, not having seen the movies, the movie that I'm most aware of is The Devils. And it seems to me that the hallucination of the orgiastic rape of the convent is probably a very Ken Russell kind of tick.
It is, yes. You have nailed it in one.
Yeah. So wait, when you said
the shot on video with like really elaborately shitty chroma key post-production effects, orgy rape of nuns with a worm coiled around a cross dream sequence. Yes. Very, very much what I was here to see. Up to and including the fact that it was like just really low res and ugly compared to the rest of the movie. And there's another dream sequence. It's
the
it's
plane.
not it's not quite as florid in its tastelessness. It has, I don't think, any nudity. Certainly it does not have an orgy of nuns, but does have that kind of surrealist quality. It does, I think, have at least one point where it breaks into shot on video as well.
Yeah, that sounds right. And there was a very elegant way to get into that dream, which is Hugh Grant looking at the painting, and then he's suddenly in the painting and walks into the cave in this like kind of flat space. That was a really cool shot. I really liked that. But yeah, so those are the 2 sequences. Yeah, those felt the most like what I imagine a Ken Russell movie is like. But wait, so his other stuff, is it that low res and gross to look at?
It's not that it's low res and gross. I don't actually think I can name another one that is doing that, in part because most of his career, like, that wouldn't have really been an option technically. But his films being aggressive, and like the point of them is that they're not pleasant in some way. Like they're ugly, they're gross, they're something. Like I think of, to me, a quintessential Ken Russell scene. There's so many, but like in the movie Tommy, which is the musical based on the Who concept album, he's making a joke about one of the Who cover, the album cover for the Who Sell Out. He's forcing Anne Margaret to sit in a tub full of baked beans.
Oh.
And it's a repulsive image. And like that's kind of why it's there. It's there to make you as a viewer feel like you are angry that he made you look at this image. And to me that's what he's doing. That's where I want him to be.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that. I for me, I felt like that. I mean, it's formally confrontational, so that's definitely good for him. But it looked like a Japanese TV commercial to me. That hallucinatory convent sequence.
And I hear from your tone of voice that you think that's bad.
I think Japanese TV commercials are great, but it felt like there was an added layer of like goofiness and just the extreme like pixelization of a lot of the images. That just it felt cheap and tacky and not necessarily like tawdry and gross. So I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to be feeling.
I mean, I think cheap and tacky is not an accident.
Yeah.
Because I mean, he's already done Nun Orgy. He doesn't need to go back 17 years to do Nun Orgy again to push your buttons. I think he is just having fun. I think for Ken Russell, this is a comedy. And I think when people describe it as a horror comedy, I think for him, he's not taking the horror seriously whatsoever. I think he's just having fun being a goof. I think that was a very, very correct word to use. Because it's not all about like trying to force some sort of confrontation between the audience and the content. I think a lot of it is just about like being sort of really, I don't want to say silly, but not taking the movie seriously and seeing where that goes, basically. I think is a big part of what he does.
Okay, that fair enough. He can do what he wants. He's Ken Russell.
And I will say a couple other moments. I think the fact that Lady Sylvia, the leader / only visible member of the snake cult, is almost explicitly like a leather fetish object. Like it feels like a lot of her running time, she's wearing very little clothing. And what to me is one of the signature scenes of the movie, and one where it's trying to be Ken Russell and it's 90% of the way there. She is dressed in a mostly sheer silk. I don't think calling it a robe is fair. I don't think it's substantial enough to be a robe, but it's kind of like a silk drapery.
Like an Afghan or something.
Barely obscuring her body. She is wearing what appear to be leather panties and a bra, certainly black lace if nothing else, and like not knee-high stiletto boots, and she drowns a horny teenage boy in a hot tub. That is to me the next most Ken Russell-y thing that happens, because there is this, I think, love of vaguely kinky sex. And I think you touched on that. Certainly the close-up shot of her stiletto-booted heel pressing his head under the water, that is very much a Ken Russell shot.
Okay, and I liked that scene quite a bit, and also there's at least an implication that he bites off his penis, that she bites off his penis, which is
I think that is very much so. I will say about that scene I was reading, apparently it was written and storyboarded to be full frontal male nudity in that scene, and the actor the day of just wasn't comfortable with it, so they changed it to what we see. If it had been, if you'd seen Dong in that scene, that would have also felt very Ken Russell, even more so than
okay. Good to know.
Because he was the first filmmaker to put a penis in a non-pornographic film.
Oh, thank you, Ken Russell.
Or Women in Love, not The Women. Very different movie. Women in Love, 1960.
Yeah, well, okay, a pioneer. I appreciate that. But yeah, so I really like that whole sequence. The tub itself is so luxurious and grand, and all of that. That's a lot of fun. I think the movie really comes alive whenever Lady Sylvia is on screen.
And I do too, and I think it's because she's the one thing who actually feels like a Ken Russell element.
Yeah, even though at the same time she kind of feels like she fell out of a Carry On movie. Like she's constantly making these like sexy double entendres that are just very silly in an engaging way. And then, she'll just take off her clothes and be painted blue. Like, that was a very kind of like Indian mythology kind of inspired look at the end that she has. But anyway, yeah, so she's a lot of fun. But that scene has the one moment where I was like, oh, I can see why people might call this a comedy. Because there are things that are funny, but they feel like comic relief to me. But there is a part where she's monologuing about what her goal is and resurrecting the ancient god. And then the doorbell rings, and she's right about to kill this guy she's holding something.
The skull, the skull
Yes.
of the white worm.
Yes, the skull of the white worm. And the doorbell rings, and she just interrupts herself. She's like, shit. And that's just so well timed.
Hands down, my favorite beat from this entire movie. I howled with laughter when that happened.
Yeah. No, I wish more of it was like that, but that was an exquisite moment, kind of combining everything that this is doing well.
I will say, between you wanting that moment specifically to be more of the film and you liking the tub set, you are a good candidate to watch more Ken Russell films, is my belief.
Okay, great. Like I said, I haven't done it, but I'm not opposed to it. This is not keeping me away. But yeah, how do you feel about thinking of it as a comedy?
I think it's obviously silly. And as I said, I think there are some things that we cannot be meant to take seriously. We cannot be meant to take those teeth prosthetics seriously. The moment you've pointed out is clearly comic in nature. But there's other things. There is semi-spoiler. I don't think we need to really talk about the narrative context, but it happens pretty late in the film, where Peter Capaldi gets into full Highland regalia to use bagpipes to like drive the snake cult members insane, and then kills one of them by shoving the bagpipe through his eye.
Oh, yeah.
That's not a moment we're supposed to take seriously. I mean, maybe I would buy taking the bagpipes, like using the bagpipes we were meant to take seriously, but he gets in a kill first. And that
it's a little
is,
Looney Tunes.
It's a little Looney Tunes. So I think there's a lot of moments like that it's less that we're meant to say, haha, that was a joke, and more we're just kind of meant to enjoy how absurd it is. And I think, I'd already had this thought, but when we got to that moment where it's like the full kind of stereotype that Americans think of, well, all Scots wear kilts, there's something the movie is doing a lot of where it feels to me like it's kind of amplifying this very tourist guidebook idea of England. Obviously, bagpipes are not English, they're Scottish, but
maybe
just the kind
Britain
of
in general.
The quaintness of the small town,
the
that
UK.
we have this very, worked up local legend. And I think it's worth pointing out that the book, Stoker's book, is inspired by a very particular local legend, the legend of the Lambton Worm. And so many of these little small towns in England, or medium-sized town in England, have their local hill where the giant is buried, or their local well where the dragon was killed, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something where the movie is kind of trying to poke fun at this kind of cozy Britishness by making it seem big and silly, that I don't think it always gets to. But it does feel like the whole thing is a very storybook England in a way that, in the context of 1988, just feels like it has to be some sort of piss take. It cannot be serious. And I've lost where I started this rambling tangent from, but I guess basically my thing would be, because I think you asked, do I think it's a comedy? I don't, but I think it is a frivolous movie on purpose.
Yeah, and I think if you're not, like I said, I don't really feel like the comedy is being emphasized in a way where I'd feel comfortable calling it a flat out comedy. And definitely the cop character, I believe Stratford Johns is the actor's name. He's grotesque comic relief, just absolutely insipid.
I think Stratford Johns was the butler.
Was he? Okay, then never mind.
I think Paul Brook was the cop.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, okay. Yeah, Paul Brook. Yeah, he's just a Dogberry-ass comic relief cop. Mm-hmm. ancient British tradition, and it's just not a particularly good one. But I think existing in this kind of comic sphere allows them to heighten the kind of like quote unquote horror like adventure that's going on
I
to
think
the nth
so.
degree.
I mean, I think the right way to approach it is that it's all a parody. It's not a parody of one thing. It's a parody of several things. It's a parody of like, well, it's the parody of the sort of Dogberry type figure. It's a parody of this local horror legend. It's a parody, I think, frankly, of Bram Stoker having written a shitty novel. I will say I don't think it worked. I think that's the intent. I don't think the intent manifests in the film. I think a big part is that, obviously, Amanda Donahoe is off in her own movie where she's a leather fetish object.
Yes.
And I think Peter Capaldi knew what, I mean, you don't do the bagpipe scene without some inkling of what's going on with the movie. I think Hugh Grant and the two women that we have agreed to not react to are treating this as the thing it superficially seems to be on the surface, and Hugh Grant at least has enough kind of weight in the plot that he kind of drags the movie down with him a little bit. And
Yeah.
I think at this point also Ken Russell is losing control a little bit. I think he's not the filmmaker he was in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, well, let's talk about it. You brought up Hugh Grant. Let's dive in. He's the reason we're here. So do you feel like he's giving a bad performance, or just that his performance isn't working?
I think it's that his performance isn't working. And honestly, I hate to say, because I know he's why we're here, not in a way that I have like a lot to say about, other than just I think it's kind of gormless. I think it's the Hugh Grant thing, right? And we see this in movie after movie after movie for the next 30 years. It's what we parodied at the start, sort of. Yes, very, very sort of charming, but also it's very, very pleasant, like that kind of amusing, posh, good-natured idiot thing is Hugh Grant's deal, and he's already there. Which, I mean, cool. That's good to know. But what did you think of what he was doing?
Well, so the thing is, I really like Hugh Grant when he applies that to characters who are villainous, which is what he's been doing lately with Paddington 2, with Heretic, which he's nominated for, which he's very good in. I like that, this role is very much him in like that 4 Weddings and a Funeral mode, like the thing he was going to explode with. But I do think this character is kind of more priggish. He's a little bit more of a rake than the characters he'd be playing in the 90s until Bridget Jones's Diary. So I enjoy that. I enjoy when his characters are a little meaner. They have a little more sourness to them. And this one's not quite there. He is still a hero, but he's also just kind of a rich buffoon.
He is all of that, but I think it is entirely only in comparison to the Hugh Grant 90s rom-com phenomena that you could call this a sour character.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just a little different of what you're gonna get from that type of performance in this kind of time period from him.
I think I see where you're at, and I think it's a very fair place to be. The closest I can get to being in that place is that I think the way the story proceeds, we are being invited to assume he's going to be the protagonist. And as we pointed out, you could tell the story without him being in it at all. Yeah. And I think that is the joke, is that he ultimately, when Peter Capaldi is like stabbing people with bagpipes and throwing grenades at worms, Hugh Grant is in a cave in a fetching little helmet.
Yeah, and proudly leading a team that does, I believe, nothing.
It is literally not even in the sense of nothing of narrative consequence. I don't know what actions they perform.
Yeah, I think
in like the narrative diegesis.
I got the sense that they were trying to pump gas or air into a slit in the cave for some reason, but it did not seem to have any tangible effect on what was actually going on in the third act.
And towards the end, Capaldi does say something to the effect of like, don't sell yourself short. We still needed you to something. And I was like, but what was something? Because I missed it. Yeah.
No, I missed that too. I was too busy thinking about the crackling homoerotic tension of the ending scene. I was just like, they have to kiss, right? It's a Ken Russell movie. They might be able to kiss. No, they didn't.
And I mean, certainly, and that's kind of, I think, I've pointed out some specific Ken Russell scenes. at a meta level, the most Ken Russell thing about this movie really is, dragons and snakes are sort of always penises if we're to accept the Freudians. I don't know that snakes have ever been always penises harder than they are in this movie.
Oh, this movie is
there's
so
so much
penises.
phallic imagery. There's so much phallic imagery in this movie. And I will say the bit where the other one that was like a laugh out loud joke to me is in the dream sequence on the plane, where it keeps coming back to Hugh Grant having a tiny little red tipped marker that he's like propping up over the course of several shots. Ken Russell likes his dicks. He just does.
Yeah,
I don't even think that it's not even necessarily, I don't want to say like Ken Russell no homo, but like it's not even like a gay or homoerotic thing. I think he just likes penises. I think he thinks they're funny. But he certainly is celebrating the very obvious metaphor of snakes as penises.
Oh,
in a very over the top way.
100%. I actually, there's so many like little tiny nods towards that as well. Obviously, you have, guess what? The white worm. It's a penis. But also, like, as we are kind of hinting towards the white worm, one of the ladies like trips over this kind of opaque vacuum hose at one point. There's a white garden hose. Like, there is just so much phallic imagery just shoved into this movie.
It's great. It's the thing that kept me going. It's the reason I'm at 3 stars and not 2.5. Honestly, is that it's never boring because it's always got this, like, it's really leaning into the phallic imagery.
Do you feel like that's servicing a theme or is just having fun?
I think it's supposed to be servicing a theme, but I think the people making it didn't care if that actually played, because even if it doesn't get to the theme, at least it's funny. I think might have been the mentality.
Yeah, and I think just
because there is a theme. It's about male braggadocio. It's again about this Hugh Grant character, sort of like embodiment of English nobility, who is a buffoon who doesn't do anything. So there's a theme there, I think, for the plucking. I don't know if the film is foregrounding it.
Yeah, and it's like, I guess in order to defeat the evil temptress, they have to kind of destroy the penis in a way with a grenade. That's kind of perfunctory. But yeah, I guess it's there. I was just like, I'm just enjoying the phallic imagery. That's the thing that kept me going in Power of the Dog, actually, the Jane Campion movie.
I feel we have made history. I guarantee this is the first time Power of the Dog and Lair of the White Worm have been compared.
No, I'm proud to be the first of anything. But oh god, I think the amount of phallic imagery is about 1-to-1 between those two movies. Just Benedict Cumberbatch like driving those stake posts into the ground and staring at Cody Smith McPhee. That a delight. Anyway, this movie, great. Did you have something you were going to say?
Well, I feel like I derailed you because you were talking about the homoeroticism in the climax.
Oh yeah, no, it didn't quite go where I wanted it to, but it wasn't going to. But it's just like there's a general kind of like atmosphere of eroticism around everything in this movie. It doesn't quite click when Lady Sylvia's not on screen, but it's there. That's nice.
I definitely think it is worth acknowledging the mood that a Ken Russell film creates, even a sort of half-assed, compromised Ken Russell film like this one. When I'm using words like hard and climax, there's part of my brain that goes tee-hee-hee. Just because you get sex on the brain in a certain way. And I think that the movie is very... I don't want to say it's sexy, because it's not. It's very an 8-year-old laughing at sex a lot of the time. And I enjoy that about it. And I enjoy that about his filmography.
Yeah, no, that's very nice. And like I said, there are other things about it that are over the top in a way that is pleasing. Like, this is a movie where Hugh Grant cuts a woman's mom in half with a sword, and then you see both halves of her on the ground wiggling like snakes. That was both a pretty cool effect and just such a fun kind of exaggerated horror scene.
I laughed out loud. That was the third time I laughed out loud in the movie. I don't know if I was supposed to, but it was, I think, just so pleasantly shocking that happened. Yeah. And it wasn't like a belly laugh. It was like, ha ha, like that sort of laugh. But it was a good time.
Wait, so
and Hugh Grant sold it. I think that might have been the best part of his performance, was like selling that as something he might have done.
Yeah. Wait, so you laughed at that? You laughed at her monologue being interrupted. Did we talk about what the third laugh would have been?
The marker in the
yes.
plane dream sequence.
Of course. Were there any more, or was that kind of the end of it?
I'm trying to think if I actually laughed at Capaldi in a kilt or if I was just like, yeah.
It doesn't feel like a big laugh moment to me.
Because it's not like there's a punchline part of it. It's more like he just gets into the kilt and then does the bagpipes. I think it's certainly funny. I don't know if it was laugh out loud funny.
Yeah, I did. Okay, so I don't. One thing that made me laugh's not the right word, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. Is that so? The guy playing the cop, I think he has a lazy eye, or like his eyes kind of look in different directions. I don't know exactly what the term for that is. But when he has,
I'm sure there's a real medical term, but I think lazy eye is the common way of describing it.
Yeah. But when he has like red, spoiler alert, when he has like red snake eyes at the end, they're also doing the same thing, and I was just like, oh, that
was cute.
That's a neat effect.
And that actually was the moment that I felt confident that the bad teeth prosthetics were not an accident, because that when we see him as a snake god or whatever it is,
snake vampire thing.
Snake vampire, thank you, snake vampire thing. That's obviously a joke. So that led me to feel comfortable in assuming it was always a joke every other time we saw it.
Yeah, fair enough. And this was certainly not on purpose, but it feels right for a Ken Russell movie of this stripe. It was shot by Dick Bush, which is reading the credits was one of the biggest delights for me in this movie.
I get that. And, Dick Bush, not a nobody. Like, this is an important name if we are looking at the annals of British cinematographers.
Absolutely.
But also when you see Dick Bush in the credits, you're like,
yeah. Bush. No, he's one of the great Hollywood dicks. We've talked about this before.
Yes.
We've built out a canon, but obviously Dick Warlock is on the Mount Rushmore of Hollywood dicks.
I'm checking to see if we've had a Dick Bush before. I don't think we have.
We might have.
Did we talk about Phase 4?
We did. The Saul Bass movie.
He shot Phase 4.
Great. Yeah. So we this might be why we brought it up. Maybe we're not adding a new one, but we talked about Dick Warlock, Dick Wolf, Dick Sargent, which is an excellent one, especially because he's gay. It does sound like an old-timey slur for gay people.
And while we were talking about cinematographers, British cinematographers no less, let us never forget His Holiness Dick Pope.
That was going to be my final kind of rounding the horn. But yes, thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention, Dick Pope. We genuflect before you. But anyway, are there other things to talk about the actual movie and not just people named Dick?
I don't have the gag in my pocket, and I'll need to workshop it, and I will bring a workshop version of the gag to this podcast. But I want to see if there's a way to connect Dick Pope and St. Peter. And there is. It's not in my head yet, but I'll get to it.
Okay, I believe in you.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll do an episode on Conclave, kind of just connect everything. Her, like Madam Web, Tim's Web will connect them all.
Yes.
I only want to talk about Madam Web. She's my favorite person of 2024.
This is now the second consecutive podcast recording with you where you have stand Madam Web, and I think you might need to ask your boyfriend to make an intervention, because I think it's going to go on well for you if you keep doing this.
Look, he cannot protect me because he made me buy him a Blu-ray of the new The Crow for Hanukkah because we saw it in theaters and he was like, this was so bad and I want to watch it every year.
Okay, because I'm in my 2024 catch-up. Is The Crow so bad it's good? Because I haven't been able to get a vibe on that.
It's complicated. I don't know if it will service you in the way that you need. The thing that really helped get Ben across the line is that it finds so many ridiculous in-universe motivations to take off Bill Skarsgård's shirt, and that really kind of floated him through the parts that weren't as solidly bad good. But it is a movie that I would happily rewatch. It's very weird. It's an uncanny valley movie where it just nothing feels right. And it feels empty in a different way than Tarot feels empty, which if you listen to the last episode, we talked about that in detail. But it does feel, so it's full of people and it's full of incidents, but it does feel like a quarantine movie in a weird way. Like, I don't think it was shot during that period.
No.
But it feels like no two people are really ever in the same room, even when they're in the same shot. Like, they just feel like they're all in different movies. The villains are all just like texting each other. It's a really off kilter kind of bizarre movie where you stare at it and you're like, how could everything have gone so thoroughly wrong? So I think I don't know if you would enjoy it, but I think you should probably see it.
Okay, I can take that because it sounds like if I'm down to that versus like Russell Crowe's second exorcism movie, I'll probably have a more interesting time with The Crow.
I will not. I cannot speak to that because someone I know directed that movie, so I will say nothing.
My apologies to your friend for having made a film with like 0.5% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah. Anything else about Lair of the White Worm?
Oh yeah, that's what we're talking about. I mean, I'm glad I finally saw it. Like I said, checking off the Ken Russells is a kind of lifelong learning type of thing for me. Mm-hmm. It might actually be my least favorite Ken Russell film that I've seen to this point. I'm trying to think if anything would complicate that, and I think the answer is no. It's got a lot of things that are sort of there to say, oh, the movie's doing this, and I think we've talked about a lot of them. It is not doing them in a way that is good or entertaining, other than the fact that like all the phallic imagery just becomes kind of silly and funny. But like it's not as fun as I wanted it to be.
Yeah,
because his movies are fun for me, and this was not a fun movie.
Yeah, I agree. It's a little dry. Like there's some stuff there that will buoy you along every 10-15 minutes, but it's just not quite right, and that's a bummer. Yeah. But yeah, we were both 3 stars. It's both, it is totally, it's there if you have to watch it. But yeah, didn't bowl me over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got nothing else to say.
Okay, great. So that'll be it for Lair of the White Worm. I think we're going to close out this episode of the podcast before we just start talking about Madam Web some more, which I will probably do off air to whoever will listen. But what is going to happen next time is we are going to hopefully be back on track with the Oscar nominations theme. Oscar nominations are not out yet at the time of recording. They are set to be out at the time of airing, but they have already been delayed because of the fires, and I don't know if they will be delayed again. So we will see how that goes. But once they are, expect a new poll on the Patreon, and you can vote for what movie we cover in February.
See, again, like I can tell that Ken Russell has gotten into my head because when you say things like expect a new poll, I'm like, he said poll.
Keep an eye out. But yes, until then. Oh, we actually, speaking of the Patreon, it's back up and running. Please take a look at it. It's alternate ending on Patreon. Look it up. Oh, I will have a link in the show notes.
There's multiple links to it on the website. And I feel like Brennan is right now being very good in trying to cross promote. On our most recent podcast, which I don't know that you've listened to, Brennan, I found the cross promotion to be so canned and fake that I was like, I'm just gonna cut this out. So this is the first time we're cross promoting the Patreon on the podcast.
Oh, okay, great. You gotta do it. And also, this show is largely Patreon driven in terms of what we talk about.
Right.
It won't be every month, but at least every other month we will have a poll for what we're talking about, and there's a bunch of other fun things that you can get from that. And yeah, you know what? Since we're recording this a little ahead of time, but I think I will throw in maybe another, if you want to help donate for wildfire relief, link into the show notes. If you want to help out my community out here in Southern California, where we are having a very bad time. You can take a look at that in the notes as well.
Because I think what we can count on is that even if the fires are out by the time the episode goes live, the economy of Los Angeles will not have recovered. So there will certainly be places you can put your money to do good work.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just update with whatever the latest thing is. We're gonna have a lot of rebuilding to do, and we're feeling pretty okay about where the fires are now. They're still, I mean, that's the wrong word. It feels like things are trending positive, even though it's still quite bad at the moment. But they probably won't be out by the time that this airs. I don't see a future where that's even a possibility. But, fingers crossed. Anyway, bye, everybody. Bye.